The text came in just as I was finishing the dishes. I dried my hands, glanced at the screen, and saw it was from my best friend, Mona. Just a video clip, no caption, no warning. My heart already knew it wouldn't be good. Mona never sends me random videos, unless she's worried, unless it's something I need to see. I tapped it with a trembling thumb. It started with loud music, red solo cups, someone shouting over the crowd, "Let's play the game again." Then the camera panned to my son, my only son, standing in a circle of his friends. He looked relaxed, laughing, a little tipsy maybe. But what he said next, I still don't know how I stayed standing. "She's so annoying," he grinned, tipping his drink toward the phone. I wish she'd just vanish already. The room cheered, like he'd told the best joke of the night, like my existence was the punchline. Someone clapped him on the back. Another mimed a disappearing act, like poof, gone. Everyone howled. The video cut out, but the sound of their laughter echoed in my kitchen long after. I dropped the phone, not dramatically, just gently, like it had burned me. I leaned against the counter and stared at the fridge, blinking fast, because if I let myself cry, I knew I might not stop. My legs trembled. My ears rang. I hadn't done anything. Nothing that deserved that. He's the reason I stayed in this house. The reason I worked those 2 extra shifts when the furnace broke. I missed my own birthday last month to cover rent because he'd lost hours at work and needed help. I never complained. I never asked for anything back. I just smiled and said, "We'll get through this." But that wasn't all. 2 minutes later, Mona texted again. "I have the audio too, but are you really ready to hear what he said next?" I stared at that message for so long I didn't realize I was holding my breath. Something inside me cracked, not a clean break, a slow, grinding split. It wasn't just the words. It was knowing they weren't new. That somewhere, somehow, he'd been feeling this way for a while. That he didn't even hesitate to say it in a room full of people. I didn't reply. I just sat down on the cold kitchen floor, knees pulled to my chest, and whispered to no one, "What did I do wrong?" And I meant it. I really, truly didn't know. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, grinning, relaxed, free of any trace of the boy I'd raised. It was the face of someone who hadn't needed me in a long time, or worse, someone who never did. I spent the early morning hours cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, scrubbing the grout in the bathroom tile, reorganizing the spice rack. I told myself it was to stay busy, to keep my hands moving, but really, I was trying to outrun that sick, hollow ache in my chest. It kept crawling up into my throat whenever I stood still for too long. At 6 a.m., I finally texted Mona back. "Send it." The audio file came through a minute later. No words, just the clip. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the play button, and I swear, I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Part of me wanted to delete it without listening, pretend this was all a weird misunderstanding. But the truth was already in me. Might as well know the rest. I tapped play. It started with background chatter, glasses clinking, a bass line thumping faintly through the walls. Then his voice again, clear as day. She keeps asking if I'm okay, if I've eaten, if I've paid the bills. Like I'm 5. I mean, come on, she's obsessed. It's pathetic. A few people laughed. "Dude," someone said, "that's moms for you." "No," he cut in. "Not like her. She acts like I owe her something, just because she raised me solo, like that's some kind of medal. She's always there, always watching, breathing down my neck. I can't breathe with her around." I paused the recording. I sat very still, hands clenched in my lap, staring at the grain of the wooden table. I wasn't crying. Not yet. I just felt displaced, like my body was sitting in the kitchen, but the rest of me had floated out of the house and was watching it all from far away. He made it sound like I was some kind of leech, like I was clinging to him because I didn't have a life of my own. And maybe there was a little truth to that. After his father left when he was 3, he became my world, my whole routine, working late, saving pennies, making Sunday pancakes. It was all for him. I didn't have a life of my own. I'd never even questioned it. Until now. When I texted Mona again, I just wrote, "Thanks for sending it." She called me 10 seconds later. "I'm so sorry, Tessa," she said, voice soft, like she was afraid I'd break if she said too much. "I didn't want you to find out this way, but you deserve to know." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I just don't understand," I whispered. "When did he start hating me?" "He doesn't hate you," she said firmly. "He's lost. He's angry. And he's being cruel. Yes, but that doesn't erase everything you've done for him." I wanted to believe her. God, I needed to believe her. But that voice in my head, the one that always showed up during the worst moments, said maybe I had pushed too hard. Maybe I'd smothered him without realizing it. Maybe all my love just felt like control to him. "I need to talk to him," I said finally. Mona was quiet for a second. "Do it when you're calm, when you're ready. But promise me one thing." "What?" "Don't go in hoping he'll apologize. Go in knowing you deserve one, whether he gives it or not." That stayed with me long after the call ended. The next day, I heard his keys in the lock around 11. He was humming. Humming. Like the night before hadn't happened. Like his mother hadn't just been gutted wide open. He walked into the kitchen, reached for the fridge, and pulled out a bottle of orange juice like he owned the place. I was sitting at the table. Still. Quiet. My hands folded. I didn't want to start by screaming. I didn't even want to start with anger. I just needed to see if he'd say anything. Anything at all. But he didn't. Not even a hey. "Eli," I said calmly. He paused mid-sip, looked at me like I'd startled him. "Yeah." I saw the video. For a moment, just a second, his face dropped. His posture stiffened. The glass frozen halfway to his lips. But then he smiled. That infuriating, dismissive smile that young men wear like armor. "Oh, that." He set the glass down and leaned on the counter. "Come on, Mom. Don't take it personally. It was just a joke." I blinked. "A joke," I repeated slowly. "Yeah. I mean, you know how people are at parties. Everyone says dumb stuff. It wasn't serious." I stared at him, trying to understand how someone could throw words like knives and then pretend it was confetti. "Eli, you said I was pathetic, that you can't breathe with me around." He scoffed. God, why'd Mona even send that? She's always so dramatic. You know she's been weird ever since I stopped texting her back. I froze. Something clicked. You were seeing her. He didn't answer. His jaw tightened. "You were seeing her," I said again. "And you ghosted her." "I didn't ghost her. We hung out a few times. She got clingy." I sat back in my chair, stunned. Mona was 15 years older than him. She'd babysat him when he was little. I thought of the way she'd sounded on the phone. Soft, cautious, guilty. Now it made sense. She'd seen the ugliness up close, and now she'd handed me a truth I hadn't wanted, even as it tore her up to do it. "I don't even know who you are anymore," I whispered. "Mom, you're overreacting." And that was it. That sentence. The one people like him love to use when they're done talking. when they want to shut you down and walk away clean. I stood up slowly. I fed you with food stamps. You remember that? I went without new shoes for 3 years so you could go on every school trip. I pawned my mother's necklace to help you with your rent last month. He rolled his eyes. I do everything for you, I continued, voice rising. Not to control you, but because I love you. And if that feels like a burden to you, then maybe it's time you carry your own weight. He opened his mouth, closed it. I'm not your maid. I'm not your punching bag, and I'm done being your emotional landfill. His smirk was gone now. He wasn't humming. He wasn't leaning. He looked small, caught, but not apologetic. Not yet. I think you should stay at Marcus's place for a few days, I said finally. I need space. You need space. And maybe, just maybe, when you've done your own laundry and cooked your own meals, you'll understand what it means to be valued. He didn't fight me. He just picked up his keys and walked out. Not a word, not a glance. The door clicked shut, and the silence afterward wasn't peaceful. It was roaring. But somewhere inside that noise, I felt a strange new calm. Like the first few seconds after you pull a splinter and the wound stings, but you know the poison's finally out. The first night alone in the house was quiet, in a way I hadn't known in years. Not peaceful. No, not yet, but different. The silence didn't hum with worry about whether he'd eaten or made it home safe. It just existed. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel like I was holding my breath waiting on someone else's needs. Still, I woke early. Like always, muscle memory. I brewed coffee, forgetting I only needed to make 1 cup. I stood at the counter, staring out the window at the frost on the porch railing, thinking about how many mornings I'd stood in that same spot. My mind running on an endless loop of what Eli needed: school forms, dinner plans, late-night pickups, job applications. And now, for once, I stood still. Around noon, Mona showed up. She didn't call, just knocked. When I opened the door, she was holding a small paper bag and 2 lattes from the shop down the street. The same shop where we used to meet every Saturday, back when the boys were little, and life hadn't carved so many lines into our faces. I figured you might not have eaten, she said quietly. I stepped aside, and she walked in like she had 100 times before. Only this time the air between us held something new. Hesitation, shame, maybe grief. We sat in the kitchen, both of us wrapped in old sweaters and too many unsaid things. You knew, I said finally. About what he said, about how he talked about me. She nodded, slowly. I did. I looked at her hard. And you didn't tell me. I didn't know how, she whispered. It was all confusing. At first I thought he was just blowing off steam, like any kid does. Then I started seeing this pattern, not just about you, about everyone. He doesn't see people, Tessa. He just uses them, me included. I felt the weight of that land between us, like a stone dropped on glass. You were sleeping with him. She didn't flinch. No, we went out a few times. I thought it was harmless. I should have known better. I thought I was helping him, being a friend, offering guidance. But he didn't want that. He just wanted attention. And when I tried to be more than that, more honest, he disappeared. I nodded slowly. So you sent me the video as what? Revenge? No, she said, fiercely now. Not revenge. I sent it because I saw what he was doing to you, and I couldn't live with myself if I let it go on. You're not the one who should be punished. You've already carried enough. I sat back in my chair, letting her words settle. I believed her, but believing her didn't erase the feeling that something inside me had cracked. We talked for a long time after that, about how our friendship had weathered things before: marriages, divorces, bad decisions, lost jobs, and about how maybe this would just be another scar we carried together. When she left, I didn't feel fixed, but I didn't feel alone either. Later that night, I stood in Eli's room. It still smelled faintly like his cologne and old laundry. I looked around at the things I'd bought him: the bookshelf I assembled on my own, the quilt my mother had made before she passed. I walked over to his desk and saw the envelope I'd slipped under his keyboard weeks ago, a check I'd written to help cover his utilities. He never even cashed it. That's when it hit me. Maybe it wasn't that I'd given too much. Maybe it was that I'd given to someone who had no intention of valuing it. The next morning, I opened the windows. I don't know why it felt symbolic, but it did. The cold breeze rushed in, slicing through the stale air like scissors through old fabric. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't tiptoe around the house like someone might be sleeping in. I played music while I made breakfast. Aretha Franklin, loud and proud. And I didn't apologize to the walls for it. I even danced, a little, spatula in hand, feeling ridiculous and light and alive in equal measure. But then came the knock. I thought it might be Mona again. Maybe she'd forgotten something. But when I opened the door, I saw my neighbor, Carol, standing there in her gardening gloves. "Morning," she said, a little unsure. "Morning," I replied, wiping my hands on a dish towel. She hesitated. "Sorry to bother, I saw Eli leave yesterday with a bag and figured something was up. Everything okay?" It hit me in that moment. I'd been trying to keep it all inside. The pain, the confusion, the betrayal. But it was already leaking into the world. People noticed. I forced a smile. "We're taking some space." Things got tense. Carol nodded slowly, like she understood more than she let on. "Well, if you ever want company, I make a strong pot of coffee and terrible banana bread." That simple kindness nearly brought me to tears. Later that day, I began sorting through Eli's things, not angrily, just deliberately. It felt like clearing out a room after someone's moved away, not out of spite, but to make room for something else. I packed his clothes neatly, left his books on the shelf, but moved a few of mine in alongside them. Took down the poster he'd taped to the wall when he was 15 and replaced it with a framed print I'd never hung because he called it old lady art. I was reclaiming space, not just in the house, but in my life. I made dinner for one and didn't feel pitiful doing it. I read a chapter of a book without checking my phone for messages from him. I watched a movie that didn't involve superheroes or explosions. And when the credits rolled, I didn't feel lonely. I felt peaceful. Around 9, my phone buzzed. It was Eli. "Can I come by tomorrow to grab a few things?" I stared at the message for a full minute before typing, "Yes, noon." No heart. No smiley face. No, "I love you." Just clear, calm, and boundaried. I spent the rest of the night lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of son texts his mother like a landlord. But I didn't spiral. I didn't make excuses for him. I didn't reach for old habits like guilt or self-blame. I just let the question hang there. And then, I let it go. The next morning, before he arrived, I sat in the living room with a mug of coffee, breathing deeply. I didn't know what he would say, or if he'd say anything at all. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't the same woman who watched that video on her kitchen floor. I wasn't the same mother who clung to his affection like it was oxygen. I had stood in the wreckage of who I thought we were, and I'd chosen not to drown in it. At exactly 12 noon, the knock came. I didn't flinch this time. No racing heart, no queasy stomach, just a quiet exhale as I stood and walked to the door. Eli looked the same as always. Jeans, hoodie, expression somewhere between indifferent and mildly annoyed. He wasn't carrying flowers. No apology on his face. If anything, he looked like someone returning to a hotel room to retrieve a forgotten charger. "Hey," he said, eyes flicking past me like he was checking to see if anyone else was inside. "Come in," I said simply, stepping aside. He walked in and went straight to his room like it was any other day. I followed but stayed by the doorway, watching him as he surveyed the packed boxes, his eyebrows lifted. "You packed already." "I figured it would save you time." He opened a few boxes, checked the contents, and gave a half shrug. "Cool. Cool." I watched him pull a duffel from under the bed and toss in a few things. Headphones, chargers, a random hoodie. Not a word about the video, not a word about the audio, not a word about me. "Eli," I said finally, "you don't have to pretend nothing happened." He zipped the bag without looking at me. "Look, I know you were upset. I get it. But like I said, it was taken out of context. People talk trash when they're drunk. Doesn't mean anything. It meant something to me." Now he looked up. "Mom, why are you making this a big deal?" "Because it is a big deal," I said, keeping my tone steady. "You said things that were cruel, not just careless. Cruel. And you said them about the person who's given up more for you than you'll ever understand." His mouth twisted. "Here we go again with the guilt trip." "No guilt trip," I said. "Just facts." He looked at me like I was suddenly speaking a language he didn't understand. I stepped further into the room. "You don't have to love me the way I love you. That's not what this is about. But what you do have to do is treat me like a human being. I'm not your punching bag, Eli. And if you can't even apologize after what you said, then you've got bigger problems than me." Something in his face changed then. Not regret, exactly, but discomfort. Like he'd finally realized I wasn't going to let this slide, that the rules had changed. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he muttered. "Okay? Then don't." He sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly quiet. "I don't know how to fix this." "I'm not asking you to fix it," I said softly. "I'm asking you to face it. Sit with it. Think about what kind of man you want to be, not just around your friends, when no one's watching." We sat in silence for a long moment. Then he stood, grabbed the duffel, and slung it over his shoulder. "I'll come get the rest next week," he said. "No rush," I replied, "but I'll be changing the locks soon." That made him pause. "You're kicking me out?" "I'm setting boundaries." He didn't fight. He didn't yell. He just nodded slowly and walked out. I didn't watch him drive away. I didn't cry. I just closed the door, locked it, and leaned my forehead against the wood, breathing. That night, Mona called again. I told her what happened, how he didn't scream or sob or throw things, how he didn't say thank you, or sorry, or anything in between. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Maybe it's not about what he says anymore. Maybe it's about what you choose next." And I realized she was right. I'd spent so many years waiting for someone else's words to tell me who I was. Eli's approval, his affection, his gratitude. And now, I had no idea what came next. But for the first time in a long, long while, the not knowing felt like freedom. It's strange, the way silence can turn from something sharp to something soft. For weeks, I'd filled the house with music and movement just to avoid hearing the echo of my own thoughts. But now, when the clock ticked and the wind rattled the windows, I didn't rush to drown it out. I let it stay. It was a Wednesday morning when I walked into the guest room, once Eli's room, now stripped to its bones. I opened the closet and stared at the emptiness. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I brought in a sewing machine. It had been buried in the garage beneath dusty holiday decorations and broken picture frames. I cleaned it off, slowly, careful with the cloth like I was handling something sacred, because, in a way, I was. There was a time, long before Eli, when I used to make things. Quilts, pillow covers. One summer I made dresses for my sister's twin girls. But then came the jobs, the bills, the PTA meetings, and doctor's appointments. Somewhere along the line, the fabric got folded away, the threads tangled, and I told myself there just wasn't time. But now, time was all I had. I started simple, a patchwork square from scraps. But as the needle hummed and the fabric moved under my fingers, I felt something I hadn't in a long while. Control. Not over someone else's life. Not over how I was perceived. Just over me. Over what I made, what I touched, what I chose to shape. Later that week, Carol stopped by again, this time with tea and her dog in tow. We sat on the porch while she chatted about her daughters and her roses and how hard it is to find decent help for gutter cleaning. I listened. I laughed. And I realized how little I'd allowed myself to connect before. For years, I'd wrapped my entire world around Eli. There hadn't been room for anyone else. After Carol left, I got another text. Eli again. Do you need help with groceries or anything? I read it 3 times, not because it warmed me. It didn't, not really. But because it was the first time in years he'd asked if I needed anything. I didn't reply right away. I went to the kitchen, looked through the pantry. Then I sat at the table and let the question breathe. Finally, I wrote, "I'm okay. Thank you for asking." That was it. Simple. Clean. A moment of civility that didn't erase the past, but didn't recreate it either. The next day, Mona and I met at the coffee shop. She was nervous, I could tell. Her eyes darted every time I mentioned Eli, but I didn't bring it up. Not because I was ignoring it, because I didn't need to anymore. Instead, we talked about her new job at the library, and I told her about the quilt I was starting. She smiled, real and wide, and said, "It's good to see you like this again." Like what? Like you, not just Eli's mom. That stuck with me. I'd been someone else once. I just forgot. That evening, I stood outside in the backyard, watching the sun dip behind the neighbor's maple tree. I wasn't thinking about Eli. I wasn't waiting for the next call or crisis. I was thinking about color schemes, about dinner, about whether I should plant tomatoes again this spring. I hadn't given up on my son, but I'd given up waiting for him to save me. And maybe, just maybe, that was the only kind of freedom I ever really needed. It had been just over a month when Eli called. Not a text this time, not a dry transactional request. An actual call. I stared at the screen as it rang. My stomach tightened, but not like before. This time, it was more like curiosity than dread. Like flipping over the last page of a book you stopped reading a while ago, I answered. "Hey, Mom," he said. His voice was quieter than usual. No posturing, no breathy frustration, just soft. Like someone trying not to wake a sleeping animal. "Hi," I said. My voice was steady. There was a pause, a real one, not that fake, "Give me a second to think of what I want from you." Pause, just silence. "I've been thinking," he said, "about everything." I didn't rush to respond. I let him carry the next step. "I know I messed up," he said. "What I said at the party. And before that, I didn't even know Mona had sent it to you until Marcus told me. I got mad at first. But then I listened to it again. Really, listened." He exhaled like the air had been trapped inside him for weeks. "You didn't deserve that. any of it. For a moment, I couldn't speak, not because I was overwhelmed, but because the voice in my head had always imagined this moment would feel bigger. It didn't. It felt quiet, real. "Thank you," I said. "I thought about coming by," he continued. "But I didn't want to just show up. I didn't know if you'd want that." Another pause. "I miss you, Mom. Not just the house. You." I sat down on the edge of the couch, fingers curling around the phone like it might disappear if I didn't hold tight enough. "I miss you too," I said. "But I need to be honest, Eli. Things are different now, and I want them to stay different." "I know," he said quickly. "And I want that too. I want to be better." We talked for a little while after that, about surface things, his job, the apartment, how he finally learned how to cook pasta without burning it. But it was different this time, not performative, not like he was performing the role of good son. It was awkward, stilted, but sincere. When we hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't replay every sentence for hidden meanings. I just put the phone down and went back to hemming the quilt. A few days later, Mona and I signed up for a beginner's ceramics class at the local community center. She was terrible at it. I wasn't much better. But we laughed until our ribs hurt, and our aprons were covered in wet clay. We walked to the car after class with our lopsided bowls in hand and made jokes about opening a gallery called Ugly But Honest. It felt like something new was blooming, not just with Mona. With me, I found myself saying yes to invitations I used to avoid. I had lunch with Carol and her book club. I started volunteering at the senior center once a week, helping women fix up their old sewing machines and hemming pants for those who couldn't afford a tailor. Every time I gave a little piece of myself to the world, it gave something back. Not praise, not perfection, just connection. The kind I hadn't allowed myself to want, because I'd believed Eli was supposed to be enough. One Saturday afternoon, while I was pinning fabric swatches for a new quilt, the doorbell rang. I opened it and found a box sitting on the porch. No note, just my name scrawled in rushed handwriting. Inside was a bundle of fabric, vintage prints, a few with sunflowers, my favorite, and on top, a small white envelope. It was a card. "Mom, I saw these and thought of you. Thank you for everything, even the things I didn't see until now. Love, Eli." I stood in the doorway for a long while, the breeze brushing my arms, the card warm from the sun. I didn't run to call him. I didn't fall apart. I just pressed the card to my chest and whispered, "Okay." Not, "It's all fixed." Not, "He's perfect now." Just, "Okay. Enough for now." Spring came late that year, but when it did, it arrived all at once, daffodils exploding from the dirt like they'd been waiting for a sign. The world smelled like thawed soil and possibility, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't chasing after time. I was walking beside it. I'd signed up to host a table at the town's spring fair. Carol had encouraged me after seeing the baby blanket I made for her niece. "People will love this stuff," she'd said, patting the folded quilt like it was a living thing. "You should show it off." So I did. I spent the week before the fair stitching with nervous hands, labeling price tags I wasn't sure anyone would read. But it wasn't about the sales. It was about standing in front of a table with my name on it. Not Eli's. Not someone else's dream. Just mine. Mona helped me set up that morning. She brought coffee and cinnamon rolls and told everyone who passed that I was basically the town's secret Martha Stewart. I rolled my eyes and laughed and let her brag. Because the truth was, it felt good to be seen for something that had nothing to do with pain or sacrifice. Just before noon, while I was smoothing the edge of a tablecloth, I saw him, Eli. He stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I just felt taller now, stronger. His hair was a little longer, and there were dark circles under his eyes. But he was clean-shaven, sober, steady. He didn't walk straight up. He lingered, like he was checking the weather between us before stepping forward. "I saw the flyer," he said finally. "Thought I'd come see what you've been making." I nodded. "I'm glad you did." He looked down at the table, running his fingers across a row of coasters I'd stitched from leftover fabric. "These are really nice," he murmured. "Thank you." He picked one up, blue and yellow, the colors of the old guest bedroom. "This reminds me of that quilt Grandma made. I used some of her patterns." There was a pause. The breeze kicked up, tossing petals across the pavement. "I know you don't owe me anything," he said quietly. "But I want to try again. Not just with you, with life. I've been going to meetings, got a part-time job at the bookstore. It's not much, but I show up every day." I looked at him closely then, not as my son, not as my failure or my burden, just as a man, a young one, trying to stitch something broken back together. "I'm proud of you," I said, and I meant it. "I was horrible to you," he whispered. "Yes," I said gently. "You were." He winced but didn't look away. "But you're here now," I added, "and that matters." He glanced at the other booths, the families, the music, then back at me. "Can I help you today? You know, at the table?" My chest tightened, not with pain this time, but something warmer. Still cautious, still measured, but warm. "You can help," I said. "But if you're going to stand here, you have to talk people into buying the ugly potholders, too." He smiled. "Small. Real. Deal." Mona returned an hour later, eyes widening when she saw him beside me, folding a table runner and chatting with an elderly woman who'd mistaken it for a scarf. I caught her look, gave her a small nod. She didn't interrupt. She just stepped in beside me and offered me half a sandwich like nothing was out of place. That evening, after we packed up and the crowd faded, Eli walked me to the car. "Thank you," he said again, "for letting me stand there today." "I didn't let you," I said. "You showed up. You earned it." He nodded. "Do you think we'll ever be close again?" I closed the trunk, turned to him. "I think we might become something new," I said. "Something better." He looked surprised, relieved, a little afraid. And I understood that. I was too. But not in the way I used to be. Not afraid of being left behind. Just cautious of building slow. Honest, brick by brick. As I drove home, the back seat filled with unsold quilts and new beginnings, I realized something. The moment I stopped needing Eli to be everything, he had room to become something. A week after the fair, I found myself sitting on the back porch, legs tucked under me, a warm cup of tea in hand. The quilt I'd made, the one stitched from scraps of all the others, rested across my lap, like armor made of softness. It was imperfect, colorful, patched together from moments both painful and proud. It looked exactly like my life. Eli had called twice since the fair, not to ask for anything, just to say good morning, or tell me something small, like a book he started, or a weird dream he had. I didn't overanalyze it. I let the words land where they landed, like wild birds. Welcome when they came, free to fly when they didn't. Mona stopped by that afternoon, her arms full of glossy magazines and a bundle of tulips. "You're officially featured in the local spotlight section," she said, grinning like a proud agent. "Page 23, right above the guy who paints raccoons on rocks." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my tea. "She stayed for dinner. We sat at the table like we used to before everything got complicated, and for the first time in years, there were no sharp corners in the air, just stories, soft clinks of cutlery, and the kind of comfort that doesn't need explaining. When she left, I lingered at the door, watching her walk down the driveway under the amber light. I looked around my home, and took it in. The plants on the sill, the framed fabric art on the walls, the scent of lavender and slow-roasted garlic. There was no trace of the fear I used to live with, no frantic pace to fix what felt like it was always falling apart. The next morning, I opened my email to find something unexpected. Subject: Community Speaking Panel. Request. It was a message from the director of the senior center. They were organizing a panel for local women to speak about personal transformation and resilience. Someone had nominated me. I reread that line a dozen times. It didn't say who, but I had a hunch. They wanted me to share my story. Not as someone who survived motherhood, but as a woman who had found her footing again. I didn't say yes right away. I took the day to walk, to sew, to sit with it. That night, I called Eli. "Did you nominate me for the panel at the senior center?" I asked. He chuckled. "Maybe." "Why?" "I thought they should know who you are, not just the version that used to drive me to soccer. The real one. The one I'm still getting to know." I paused, holding the phone gently, like it contained something sacred. "Thank you," I said. "Will you do it?" I smiled. "Yeah, I think I will." The day of the panel, I stood in a modest room filled with folding chairs and women of every age. Some in cardigans, some in sharp suits, some holding tissues before a single word had been spoken. I told my story honestly. No frills, no dramatic crescendos, just truth. About the clip, the silence, the heartbreak, the rediscovery. I didn't hide my hurt, but I didn't center it either. Afterward, an older woman came up to me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "I thought I was the only one." "You never are," I said. Eli met me afterward outside. He didn't say much, just handed me a small box. Inside was a pin, an old enamel one I'd worn on my apron when I used to work weekends at the diner. He'd found it in a box and thought I'd want it back. "I remember this," I said, brushing a thumb over the chipped edge. "You used to wear it when you looked tired, but still smiled at everyone." I nodded slowly. It helped remind me I was still here, even when I didn't feel like I was. "I think you're more here now than I've ever seen you," he said. "And I just want you to know. I see that. And I'm trying." "I know," I said. "And I don't need perfect. I just need honest." He nodded. "Then I'll keep showing up. If you'll let me." "I will," I said. "But this time, not as your safety net, just as your mother." We hugged, not long, not dramatic, just enough. That night, as I stitched the last square into a new quilt, I thought about all the women who'd sat in that room, about all the years I spent waiting for someone to choose me, validate me, see me. But I'd already done the hardest part. I saw myself, and I chose her.